In the vast landscape of human consciousness, there exists an increasingly apparent boundary between the known and the unknown, the perceptible and the imperceptible. As humanity probes deeper into the mysteries of existence, we encounter phenomena, ghosts, near-death experiences, NDEs, and paranormal events that challenge our conventional understanding of reality. But what if these experiences are not anomalies or flights of fantasy? What if instead they are the reverberations of higher dimensional interactions, misunderstood through the lens of our limited perception? In this essay, we explore a fascinating hypothesis that merges quantum mechanics, the nature of consciousness, and the concepts of ghosts and hauntings. Through a model known as the hierarchy of degrees of awareness, we can frame these phenomena in a way that links them to the fundamental structure of reality itself, shedding light on what might truly be happening when we encounter the unknown. The hierarchy of degrees of awareness can be visualized as a progression of conscious states, each degree representing an increasing level of complexity, organization, and interaction with reality. At the most fundamental level, the first degree of awareness is pure potential, the quantum field, where particles exist not as fixed objects but as probabilities. This is the domain of undifferentiated awareness, holding the latent potential for all forms of existence. First degree awareness, pure potential and the quantum field. At this level, reality exists as a fluid spectrum of possibilities. It is the very foundation of existence, where all particles and forces remain in an unmanifest state, awaiting the moment of observation to collapse into specific forms. This concept resonates with quantum mechanics, particularly the double-slit experiment, where particles behave as waves until observed, at which point they choose a definite state. Here, we touch upon the essence of existence before it manifests in recognizable patterns, a realm of pure potentiality. Second-degree awareness, the emergence of structure and form. As awareness deepens, the second degree introduces the emergence of self-organizing structures. Basic forces such as attraction and repulsion come into play, shaping energy into recognizable forms, atoms, molecules, and the atomic structure that underpins the material world. In this state, the fundamental forces of nature begin to coalesce into the first meaningful patterns of reality, forming the building blocks of the universe. To explore the idea of our limited perception, we can draw a parallel with the way humans perceive animals. Consider how we, as conscious beings, interact with animals. To them, we might seem like giants, abstract and incomprehensible in our complexity. Our thoughts, emotions, and actions are beyond their grasp. Just as we observe and influence their lives in ways they cannot fully understand, so might higher dimensional beings, or advanced levels of consciousness, interact with us. In this analogy, the complexity of human consciousness far exceeds that of most animals, much as our perception and understanding of reality may seem equally incomprehensible to beings of higher awareness. From their perspective, we may appear as fleeting, ghostly presences, manifesting only in brief, highly simplified glimpses. Their understanding of us may be fragmented and abstract, just as our understanding of them is similarly limited. Now imagine the interaction between a human and an atom, a relationship that is so beyond our direct understanding that it is almost unimaginable. To us, an atom is merely a part of the material world, a building block of everything we perceive. However, if we were to step into the consciousness of the atom, it might seem as if we are invisible giants, interacting with a microcosmic entity that can only respond in a limited way. Now consider the perspective of higher dimensional beings. Just as we might attempt to understand or interact with the consciousness of an atom, so too might higher dimensional beings interact with us. From their point of view, our human consciousness, limited to three-dimensional space and time, could appear as a mere shadow or ghostly presence, incapable of fully perceiving the greater dimensionality in which they exist. This framework helps to explain why certain phenomena, such as hauntings or ghost sightings, may not be supernatural in a traditional sense, but rather a result of interactions between different levels of awareness, an interdimensional communication breakdown. Reframing ghosts. Misunderstood interdimensional communication. The conventional explanation for ghosts often involves the idea of spirits of the deceased lingering in the material world, unable or unwilling to move on. However, through the lens of higher dimensional awareness, this interpretation could be expanded. Rather than being the spirits of the dead, these ghosts may actually be the attempts of those in higher states of awareness to communicate with us. When consciousness shifts between dimensions, whether through death, near-death experiences, NDEs, or moments of heightened awareness, it can encounter significant barriers in communication due to the limitations of human perception. From the perspective of the deceased, or the higher dimensional consciousness, we are the ones who are struggling to understand their signals. Just as it would be nearly impossible for us to interact with the consciousness of an atom or have a conversation in a human language with an animal, so too might it be nearly impossible for us to fully understand or perceive the attempts of these higher beings or transcendent consciousnesses trying to reach us. What we interpret as hauntings may simply be the result of our limited understanding of how these higher realms function. For example, individuals who experience NDEs, near-death experiences, often report an overwhelming sense of connection to the totality of existence. This exposes a discrepancy in the term near-death experience. These individuals do not nearly die, they do die temporarily. We just don't collectively understand that this state they achieve is not a death, but rather an interdimensional transition that is more long-term. During these so-called NDEs, these individuals describe their experiences as unveiling the illusion of separation, recognizing that their individual self was merely a temporary focus of a greater, fractalized consciousness. This is not an isolated phenomenon, but a shift in perception, perhaps akin to remembering a higher state of awareness that transcends the limitations of human life. In these experiences, individuals often report meeting deceased loved ones, encountering beings of light, or experiencing the totality of existence, views that transcend the space-time limitations of our material world. These encounters may not be supernatural in the traditional sense, but rather an encounter with the higher dimensional aspects of reality that exist beyond our human understanding. In the same way that an atom, or even a pet we've lived with for decades, cannot fully grasp the complexity of a human being, we may be unable to comprehend the full depth of the interactions we have with beings from higher planes. When consciousness transcends the physical body, it may return to these higher dimensional states, where time, space, and even the concept of self no longer hold the same weight. The return to this higher state of awareness may be the origin of what we perceive as a spiritual experience or an NDE. Time, relativity, and the interdimensional nature of consciousness. Time, as experienced by human consciousness, operates in a linear fashion, past, present, and future. However, the relativity of time, as explored in quantum mechanics, suggests that time is not an absolute construct, but rather a byproduct of perception. In higher dimensional states, time may not function in the way we understand it, and what we perceive as death may simply be the shifting of consciousness from one degree of awareness to another. The movie Interstellar offers a cinematic representation of this idea, showing how time can behave differently depending on the observer's frame of reference. In the film, characters experience time dilation near a black hole, where time flows differently depending on the gravitational field. This concept can be extended to consciousness itself. Just as gravity distorts time, so too does the expansion of awareness distort the perception of time and reality. In the higher dimensional realms, an individual's experience may stretch or compress in ways that are entirely alien to our current understanding. Ultimately, the woohoo phenomena, the ghost sightings, the paranormal experiences, and the spiritual communications are not random or mysterious occurrences, but rather interactions between different layers of consciousness. These events may represent a breakdown or distortion in the communication between our limited, three-dimensional consciousness and the broader, more complex awareness that exists beyond the physical realm. When we approach these experiences through the lens of quantum mechanics, consciousness, and higher dimensional awareness, we begin to understand that what we perceive as ghosts or spirits may in fact be nothing more than the echoes of a higher dimensional communication trying to break through to our limited perception. By recognizing that consciousness operates on multiple levels, each with its own set of rules, we can bridge the gap between science and spirituality, offering a more holistic understanding of the nature of existence. The experiences of the paranormal are not separate from the fabric of reality, but rather intrinsic to it, revealing the deeper interconnections between all forms of awareness and existence. What we once dismissed as woohoo is in fact a complex interplay of dimensions, each with its own rules and perceptions, a reminder that the true nature of reality remains far beyond our current grasp, but is nonetheless part of the grand cosmic dance of consciousness. The perception of humans by animals, dogs as conscious explorers. When we observe the behavior of a dog, especially in its early stages of development, we witness an exploration of the world that seems in many ways abstract, fragmented, and exploratory. A puppy's interaction with humans is based on simple reactions, responding to sights, sounds, and motions. But at the same time, dogs have an instinctual ability to sense our emotional state, attuning themselves to our moods, gestures, and subtle cues in ways that seem almost uncanny. However, despite these remarkable capabilities, the dog's awareness of humans is still limited. A dog perceives us through its own sense of reality, visual, auditory, olfactory. Our speech, our thoughts, our reasoning, these are alien concepts to them. To a dog, we might seem like strange, large beings, emitting sounds that are unintelligible but carrying some sort of emotional charge. We could be seen as fleeting and abstract, just as we view animals like insects or birds, aware of their presence but unable to fully understand the depth of their world or perspective. When we think of how a dog perceives us, it's much like how we might be perceived by higher dimensional beings. Dogs understand us as beings they interact with, but they don't comprehend the complexity of our actions, thoughts, or emotional layers in the way that we, as self-aware beings, do. The analogy between dogs and humans parallels how humans might seem like ghostly presences to beings with a more expansive level of awareness. The behavior of a baby is also highly analogous in this context. Babies are born into a world that is vast, filled with sensory data, and still developing their ability to conceptualize it. When a baby looks at the world, their focus isn't on the complex structures of society, but rather on simple cause and effect relationships. They observe humans, react to their touch, and learn about their voices and faces. Just like a dog, a baby interacts with its environment in fragmented and basic ways, gradually building a more complex understanding. When a baby first starts engaging with humans, their actions may seem limited to basic needs. They cry for food, they smile in recognition, they babble with curiosity. But behind these simple actions is a complex development of awareness, a growing sense of self in relation to others. A baby learns who they are through interactions, through others' facial expressions and voices. What seems like a primitive or incomplete level of perception is actually the first stages of a deeper understanding of self, consciousness, and the surrounding world. In the same way we might be perceived by higher beings is through the lens of this developmental process. Just as a baby gradually becomes aware of their place in the world, we too are gradually becoming aware of our place in a broader, interdimensional reality. From a higher dimensional perspective, we may seem like infants or puppies exploring the vastness of existence, reacting to stimuli, but lacking the full awareness that might come with higher levels of consciousness. We might appear fragmented and abstract in much the same way. The universal parallel, development of awareness and perception. The analogy works because it highlights a universal truth. Awareness and perception grow and evolve. Both a dog and a baby learn and grow through their direct interactions with the world. Their awareness is in its infancy, gradual, experimental, and limited. As we move into higher levels of consciousness, we begin to see a more complex web of relationships, interactions, and understandings. In this sense, the way we appear to higher dimensional beings, like dogs or babies to us, is both strange and fragmented, limited by the scope of their perception and awareness. Similarly, from a higher consciousness's perspective, we may seem to be ghostly presences, flashes of awareness without full comprehension. Just as a dog or a baby cannot fully comprehend the world of humans and the complexity that lies within it, so too do we struggle to understand the vast interconnected dimensions that might exist outside of our perception. The potential for evolution, expanding awareness. Just as a baby grows and learns to understand the complexity of the human world, We too are evolving in our understanding of higher dimensions. The journey from a limited understanding, like that of an animal or infant, to a broader awareness mirrors our potential growth into higher consciousness. This growth is not simply biological, but vibrational. We are moving from a place where we experience reality from a limited perspective to one where we can perceive it as an interconnected whole. This analogy invites us to ask, what would it be like to perceive reality from the standpoint of a higher being? What is it like to see past the material world and into the true nature of existence? Perhaps just as we as humans help guide the development of animals or babies, our spiritual evolution could be a part of the larger cosmic development. The more we expand our consciousness, the more we may begin to perceive the world in its full complexity, just as a baby's developing mind begins to perceive more and more of the human world as it grows. The analogy between animals, particularly dogs, babies, and higher dimensional beings, underscores a central theme. Perception is deeply tied to the level of awareness one possesses. Whether it is a dog seeing us as strange giants or a baby interacting with a world it cannot yet understand, awareness unfolds over time, and with each new level, a more complex reality is revealed. Ghosts, then, may not be spirits wandering aimlessly through our world, but manifestations of higher dimensional interactions, glimpses of something greater that we cannot yet fully comprehend. Our limited awareness, like that of a dog or a baby, may prevent us from fully understanding these encounters, but they point to a deeper interconnected reality that we are only beginning to grasp. As we expand our consciousness, we might find that we, too, are like babies in the process of awakening to a vast and intricate universe, one where all things, all beings, and all dimensions are woven together in an eternal dance of awareness. The more we grow, the more we might begin to understand how we fit into this grand cosmic puzzle, shedding the veil of limitation and moving closer to the higher awareness that governs the universe. In this sense, the ghosts we encounter are simply echoes of a reality that exists beyond our comprehension, waiting for us to grow into it. And just as a dog or a baby will one day understand more of the world, so too will we come to perceive the vast and interconnected nature of all existence. This speaks to a hauntingly deep disconnect between our awareness and the impact our actions have on the world around us. The way we interact with animals, often unaware or indifferent to the pain and suffering they endure, mirrors how we as humans are complicit in the cycle of destruction and disconnection from the true nature of existence. When looking at reality at this level, we reveal a deeper existential truth that what we do to other beings, we do to ourselves. By participating in systems of exploitation, whether it's the abuse of animals, the destruction of the environment, or the perpetuation of violence in society, we are indirectly reinforcing the same cycle of ignorance and suffering that we feel trapped in. The ignorance of reality, a protective shield. It is a form of systemic ignorance, or perhaps even self-deception, that shields us from the full horror of our actions. We live in a world where disconnection is the norm. Slaughterhouses are hidden away, out of sight, out of mind. We as consumers are not forced to confront the brutal reality of what it takes to bring meat to the table. The images of suffering, death, and exploitation are sanitized, tucked away behind the veil of industry and convenience. In this way, we preserve our ability to enjoy the spoils of this system, without ever having to truly feel the weight of its consequences. This is a fundamental aspect of human existence, how we construct systems to protect ourselves from the full scope of reality, and how these systems often hide the darker truths that sustain them. We eat, we live, we enjoy, but we are disconnected from the suffering that fuels our pleasures. It is easier, after all, to engage in the enjoyment of a barbecue than to face the reality that these spoils on our plates are not merely food, but the lives of sentient beings, often brutally taken. But the metaphor of slaughtering ourselves goes even deeper. The systems of exploitation and violence that sustain the illusion of comfort in our lives are inherently self-destructive. In a world governed by the interconnectedness of all things, where every action ripples out and affects the whole, the very act of consuming, exploiting, and harming other beings reinforces a cycle of suffering that ultimately harms us as well. This is not just about animals, it's about the larger web of existence. When we disconnect from the suffering of animals, we are also disconnecting from the larger reality, the truth that we are all interconnected. The violence we perpetrate upon other beings is a form of spiritual and emotional numbness, a shutting off of our awareness to the deep suffering that surrounds us. The more we engage in this, the further we distance ourselves from the awareness of our true nature, the interconnectedness of all life, and the profound, often painful truth of existence. This numbness manifests not only in the physical act of consuming, but also in our collective psyche. As we look forward to the weekend, to the barbecue, or to any moment of indulgence, we are metaphorically slaughtering our own awareness, the very awareness that could awaken us to the truth of our interconnectedness, our higher potential, and the possibility of transcending the cycles of violence and suffering. In this way, our ignorance serves as both a shield and a prison. It shields us from the uncomfortable truths of our actions, but it also keeps us trapped in a cycle of suffering that we are too afraid or too unaware to confront. The question is not just about the harm we do to animals, but about the larger metaphysical consequences of that harm. What does it mean for us, as individuals, as a society, to live in a state of willful ignorance, where we close our eyes to the true cost of our actions, in both material and spiritual terms? When we disregard the suffering of other beings, we are cutting ourselves off from the full spectrum of reality, the deep connection between all life. And yet, the tragic irony is that we, too, are subject to this violence. The same forces that oppress, harm, and exploit animals are the same ones that oppress, harm, and exploit human beings. It is a cycle of violence that ultimately serves no one. What is the way forward? How do we break this cycle of ignorance, of disconnection, of self-destruction? Perhaps it begins with a shift in awareness. When we come to understand our true place in the interconnected web of existence, we can no longer justify the violence we perpetuate, whether against animals, against the environment, or against each other. True awareness involves recognizing the sanctity of all life, and in this recognition, we begin to awaken to a deeper, more profound truth, that the violence we inflict upon others is in fact violence against ourselves. But this awareness cannot remain abstract or theoretical. It must be rooted in action. It requires that we confront the systems that perpetuate this violence, and that we begin to live in a way that aligns with the deeper truth of our interconnectedness. This might mean changing the way we live, the way we consume, and the way we treat the world around us. It may involve radically rethinking our relationship to animals, to the environment, and to each other. More than that, it requires a shift in consciousness, a movement away from the ignorance and numbness that shields us from the truth, toward a higher awareness that allows us to see the profound unity of all life. This is the true meaning of spiritual awakening: to recognize that the suffering of others is our own suffering, and to act in accordance with the deeper, more harmonious truth that binds us all together. As we come to terms with these ideas, we may begin to see that the way forward is not through continued consumption and indulgence, but through a radical transformation of our awareness. We may begin to ask, what would it look like to live in a world where violence and exploitation are no longer the norm? What would it be like to reconnect with the sacredness of all life and recognize our shared responsibility in creating a more compassionate, conscious world? Perhaps, then, the real journey is not just one of external change, but of internal awakening. It is a call to deepen our awareness, to reconnect with the deeper truths of existence, and to choose compassion, kindness, and consciousness over convenience, indulgence, and ignorance. Only through this awakening can we truly begin to heal the wounds we have inflicted on the world and on ourselves. In the end, the real question is not what we are consuming, but how we are engaging with the world. If we choose to engage in harmony with awareness of the sacredness of life, perhaps we can break the cycle of violence and move toward a future where all beings, human and animal alike, are treated with the respect and reverence they deserve.